Who Am I? Essay series. No one else, just me. Reflections on a Borderlander's identity. Quietly listening to the question, who am I? This is a documentary-style essay from a life crossing the borders of nation, language, and culture, asking again what it means to live as myself. This is a story no name could hold. May this offer you, too, a quiet moment to face the border within your heart. Journeys and Drifting, Migration and Identity in Motion, Part 1. Where did we come from? When did we come to be called Korean Chinese? Why are we here now? And where are we going? From Korea to Manchuria, and from China to the world. Under the name Korean Chinese, our lives carry the deep imprint of migration and border crossing. The beginning of movement. In the late 19th century, the Korean peninsula was struck by famine and poverty. In the early 20th century, under Japanese rule, exploitation and oppression deepened. To survive, people began to move, crossing mountains, wading through rivers, heading north, further and further north. Carried by the currents of history, they arrived in lands known as Gando or Manchuria. There were no clear borders, only a faint boundary somewhere between life and death. It was a choice made for survival, and at the same time, a reality they could not escape. Perhaps, at first, it was meant to be temporary, but as crops began to sprout and children were born, life slowly took root. Before words like nation or ethnicity had taken shape, people were simply searching for a place where they could live. They settled on that land and, little by little, made a life there. My ancestors, too, were part of that movement. I was told they crossed the Duman River from northern Korea and settled here. They tilled barren soil, lit fires in their stoves, and built their homes one by one. Those days were not only hardship, but carried a quiet, steady hope. Amid constant movement, they kept searching for ways to survive. Korea, a distant place where longing and pain quietly intertwine, held deep within the heart, a place they could never return to, and yet one that would never fade. Through the years of migration, their language endured, and their culture was passed from one generation to the next. Long before borders were drawn as lines, people had already begun to settle on this land, and slowly a feeling took root. This is where we belong. The times were an upheaval. The founding of Manchukuo, the arrival of Soviet forces, civil war spreading across China. In the midst of it all, People wavered between a homeland they could never return to and selves that had yet to be named. It was not so much a matter of choosing a country, but of being carried along by a shifting era and, in the end, having no choice but to survive. Under the name Korean Chinese, the state was changing and the times were in upheaval. In 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded. In 1952, the Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture was established, and we were given a name, Korean Chinese. It was not merely a label. It meant that we were formally recognized by the state as people living on this land, and at the same time placed within a defined category. As we were brought into policies and institutions, we gradually came to occupy a place within them. Within that framework, a new life of language and culture began to take shape. Korean language schools, newspapers and broadcasts, performances in our own language. Within the system of autonomy, our language and culture were sustained and passed on from generation to generation. Yet this autonomy was also closely tied to the reality of division on the Korean peninsula. Yanbian was long influenced by cultural currents from the north, and as a result, kept its distance from what was then called South Korea. Unlike our grandparents, who lived with the land rather than the nation, our parents' generation grew up within the values of socialism. Working for China, their homeland, was seen as something natural and something to take pride in. Even so, deep in their hearts, there remained a quiet longing for the place they once called home. If only once before I die, I could step again on the land where my ancestors lived. Such words were not uncommon. That feeling did not follow political boundaries. It simply remained quietly alive in the heart. Even as they settled and took root on this land, the sense of being Korean never faded. There was a time when marrying within the Korean community was simply taken for granted, and marrying a Han Chinese person was seen as something shameful. There was even a teacher who stepped down after her daughter eloped with a Han Chinese man, feeling she no longer had the right to stand before her students. One senior I met in college held similar beliefs. At a welcome event for Korean students, he said something I still remember: never date a Han Chinese. And yet today, he holds an important position in government, contributing to Chinese society. Perhaps it was not merely exclusion, but a determination to live as Korean Chinese and a sense of pride in preserving one's own culture. A fortunate generation educated in our mother tongue. In a sense, I belong to a generation fortunate enough to be educated in our mother tongue. Textbooks, exams, school life, imagination, dreams, and hopes for the future, all unfolded within the Korean language. At that time, learning both Korean and Chinese actually gave us an advantage in entering higher education. In Korean ethnic schools, there were two language subjects, Korean language and Chinese language. Korean language included Korean literature and classics, as well as materials translated from Han Chinese textbooks. Chinese language, on the other hand, was designed for Korean ethnic students less familiar with Chinese, using simpler materials adapted from standard curricula. All other subjects used nationally standardized textbooks translated into Korean. The National College entrance exam was the same as that for Han students, except that it was taken in Korean. However, the language subject was structured differently. Han students took one exam, while Korean ethnic students took two: Korean language and Chinese language, with the average counted as their language score. This system often worked in our favor and, in time, led to relatively high rates of university admission. Many Korean ethnic students went on to top universities in China. I was one of them. I grew up within that system. I dreamed in Korean, learned about the world in Korean, and imagined it through the sounds and rhythms of the language. But when I entered university in Beijing and first encountered Chinese as another world, I came to realize something. What had shaped me, in the end, was those days of living, thinking, and feeling in Korean. In those days, when almost every part of life was in Korean, Chinese felt, in a sense, like a foreign language. Many Korean ethnic students, upon entering university, found themselves struggling as everything shifted into Chinese. I was one of them. As a student of history, courses like Ancient World History and classical texts were especially difficult to adjust to. In ancient history classes, the names of places and people from ancient Egypt kept appearing in unfamiliar Chinese, sounding almost like a kind of incantation. Classical texts were another world entirely. A white-haired professor slowly reading ancient Chinese, it felt like stepping back into an old academy, and I could barely understand a single word. In my first semester, I failed those two courses for the first time in my life. Even now, I sometimes find myself thinking back to those classrooms in the Korean school. Bulletin boards covered in Korean, days when imagination spread its wings and we dreamed of the future. I hardly realized that I was living so effortlessly within that world. Identity as Korean Chinese. Within the framework of China's ethnic policies, we gradually grew into a sense of belonging to China as our homeland. Weekly flag-raising ceremonies, the solemn sound of the national anthem, the ideals of socialism and communism, and systems of recognition. All of these, repeated day after day, slowly settled into our hearts, almost without us noticing, shaping the sense that we are part of the Chinese nation, and that contributing to the country is both natural and something to take pride in. In the 1990s, as China and South Korea established diplomatic ties, a new door opened. For Korean Chinese, it felt like stepping into another world, an encounter with a world long close to us. And yet, what lay beyond that door felt unfamiliar and strangely out of tune. It seemed familiar at first glance, but in truth, it had followed an entirely different path. We could understand each other, and yet the rhythms of society, the ways of thinking, even the textures of everyday life felt subtly but unmistakably out of alignment. While living in Korea, we felt a certain cultural closeness, and yet we could never fully shake off the sense of being outsiders. The homeland we had once imagined did not fully accept us as its own. And when we came to realize that neither South Korea nor North Korea could truly be our country, it felt like a quiet fracture opening almost silently within us. In one sense, it was a break in identity, but at the same time, it brought into sharper focus our sense of belonging as Chinese. The homeland we had once held, in a vague and distant way, began to change its color over time and slowly led us to see more clearly where we truly stand. I am not Korean, but Korean Chinese living on this land. That awareness has gradually become clearer and more deeply rooted within us. Having grown up here, our ways of speaking, our ways of thinking, even the rhythms of our daily lives have, without us noticing, taken on the color of China. To live as part of the Chinese nation is no longer something imposed from outside, but something that has quietly taken root within us. After countless movements, after crossing so many borders, what remained was neither the homeland we once longed for, nor a place we could ever return to. Instead, what has taken shape on this land, what has grown and settled here, is the identity of Korean Chinese, gradually becoming clear and firmly rooted. Today, many Korean Chinese no longer see themselves simply as Korean, but come to see themselves as Korean Chinese, and carry within them the sense that they are part of the Chinese nation naturally and with a quiet sense of pride. About the author. An ethnic Korean, born in Yanbian, China, and living in Japan. Writing in multiple languages and cultures, the author captures fragments of memory and emotion through poetry and essays.